Coming up on today's Locked On Senators, we've made it. It's time for the first on-ice sessions, coming up at 10:50 and 12:25 today. But before the players step on the ice, we already know the groupings. Now, who's going to play with who?
We're going to take a look at all the biggest storylines, including who's battling who for which spots.
And a notable absence that continues to loom large. That's all coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 878 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. A reminder that you can like and subscribe wherever you download your podcast. We are free and available on YouTube. You can find the show on social media at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Today is Thursday, September 21st, and it's time. Hockey's back. Sens hockey's back. Pilsy, it's time for projections. And then we'll get into some actual debates on who should make the team and, well, which players are starting out on good footing and some that you're like, hey, why are they in that group?
Yeah, nothing like getting a list of players, putting them on hypothetical lineups, who's playing with who, depth chart, who's playing the left side, right side, who's playing center. And I'm sure Ross will do all of this, and DJ Smith will throw us a curveball, and none of these guys will be lining up the way we expect. But hey, we got to do what we can with the info we got.
The full disclosure, we're recording this episode at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, September 20th. So if Shane Pinto signed, you're like, what the heck are these guys talking about? A notable absence. We hope that's the case. Judging from Pierre Dorion, it's still a basis on the contract not being agreed to. A lot of people thinking, well, they can't agree to terms because they're going to be over the cap. You can be over the cap during training camp. I mean, you are also...
A lot of teams are.
You are also, though, telling opponents, hey, this is exactly how much money we need to get off the book. So you're kind of showing your hand a little bit. But at this point, especially with the news yesterday we spoke about, Josh Norris will be starting training camp in a yellow non-contact jersey, tweaked something shoulder-related. Pierre Dorion can pour cold water on it all he wants. But when a player's missed as much time as Josh Norris and then can't golf because of his shoulder, and that's the issue, and it's been a problem. He had to get surgery and missed part of the season when he was at Michigan still. Like, this is a recurring thing, and say what you want about the injury. Fans are not going to be, oh, okay, it must not be a big deal. Josh Norris is an X factor. We did a whole episode about how Josh Norris is an X factor for this team. But now, if Josh Norris is having a non-contact jersey, Shane Pinto's not there because he doesn't have a contract. Pilsy, it's Timmy Superstar and company then down the middle of the ice.
Yeah, for a team that looked poised to have stability down the middle finally, that's not exactly the case heading into training camp here. And in the past couple of years, never has it been said in the Ottawa Senators realm, it's just a shoulder injury. Any shoulder injury has been bolded, highlighted, asterisked, emphasized, like it's always a big deal. And especially a shoulder injury to a goalie or a defenseman, maybe not a huge deal, or even a winger, but a shoulder injury to your number 2 centerman, that is a big deal. And yeah, like you mentioned, they can try to be like, oh, if it was the season, he would play, but it's not good. It's not good.
It's not good. But let's get to something that is good. And at least we'll start with getting better and then what's actually good. What's better is, even though Tyler Boucher is going to miss the first day of training camp, and we don't know how far that will extend past that, it's not a shoulder for Tyler.
Not a shoulder. No.
Not a shoulder, which is, I'm not just saying that based off of Norris, but that's also what Tyler Boucher's major injury was last season. So he tweaked a groin in training last week. We'll see when Bush will be back on the ice for the Ottawa Senators. He is listed in Group B, and so is Shane Pinto. But Shane Pinto will not be at training camp until a contract is signed. Now, one other thing I want to bring up with regards to Pierre Dorion and DJ Smith's press conferences yesterday, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the lineups and who we project to be with who, was the expectation of this team. Nobody, the players, the GM, the coach, their expectation is to be better, but they're not willing to say the P word, Pilsy. Does that bother you?
It doesn't bother me, Ross, because I'm under the assumption that what this team is showing to the media and the fans isn't necessarily what they're putting on in-house and between just the team and just in the locker room and just coaches and management, right? Like, I think Pierre Dorion's been burned by having very hyperbolic statements in the media, and the moment they've left his mouth, I think he's regretted a bunch of statements he's made. So, look, obviously, I would prefer them to be boastful and have these bold statements, especially this is a big year, but I don't blame them for just trying to say, hey, we know we got to be better. We've got a great team. We've got a great roster. We believe in ourselves, and just kind of the normal cliche stuff, because I would rather that than them have bold statements and fall flat on their face. So it's frustrating, but understandable.
We're not afraid to put expectations on this group, Pilsy. I'm saying playoffs are bust for the Ottawa Senators. The Senators
maybe have no excuses in there as well, Ross?
No excuses. Now, the Ottawa Senators did improve 13 points in the standings year over year from 21-22 to last season. But this year, they'll need a similar improvement. They missed the playoffs by 6 points. And I don't want to be sweating it out down the stretch either, Pilsy. I want this team to be in the playoffs comfortably. And we're seeing some turmoil around the league. I don't know if you saw, and we don't have to spend much time on it, but trouble in paradise, Steven Stamkos and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Stamkos made it clear to the team that he wanted a contract going into the season, and they didn't even, not only did they not negotiate, Stamkos said they didn't even bring it up to him over the summer. So I don't know. It would be a real shame to see the two-time Stanley Cup champion, three-time finalists crash and burn in a year where Ottawa needs to take a step up.
Real shame, Ross, real shame. And especially, you can already read the tea leaves. The Toronto Maple Leafs will offer him a $13 million a year contract and just add that onto all their contracts already.
Oh, but Tampa, they had a longer offseason. They got to rest this offseason.
Rest is a weapon. If I hear that one more time, I'll go crazy.
All right, so that's our Steven Stamkos bit. But honestly, there is something to be said about Tampa, maybe taking a step back. The Boston Bruins just announced Brad Marchand's their captain, but their depth down the middle is certainly taken 1, 2, 3, 4 steps backwards with no Bergeron, no Krejci. But what are Sens fans going to say right now if Josh Norris can't play in games and Shane Pinto can't make it to training camp? I think center depth is something that Ottawa needs to have all hands on deck. Senators have only had 25 career games where Stützle, Norris, and Pinto have all played. They're 16, 8, and 1 in those games. Take that stat for what you will. Okay, let's get to the groupings. Group A and Group B are full NHL lineups in terms of numbers. And then Group C, well, if you were invited to camp but don't have a contract, welcome to Group C. We'll get into all that next. You're listening to Locked On Senators.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Athletic Greens. Ross, I took a little break from the Athletic Greens just because I got out of my routine. But today I said enough of that. I got to get back into my routine. I got to get healthy. The season's coming up. I got to be in best shape of my life mode right now as a veteran here. So I'm back on the AG1. And the reason I'm back is because it's simple. It's just one delicious scoop of AG1 in your glass of water every day, and you're getting 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and more, so you can start your day off right. And I can tell you, I already feel better today than I did the last couple of days I didn't take it, because this special ingredient supports your gut health, your nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, aging, all of those things while still being lifestyle friendly. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it's all good. AG1 contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting pretty great. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance from Athletic Greens.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Shawarma Palace. There are 20 days until the Sens season opener and 22 days until I get to have Shawarma Palace, because we're heading to town to the home opener, but you know that our first stop is at Shawarma Palace. We love the location at Rideau Street right by Augusta. That's the OG spot. But since 1997, when Shawarma Palace came to Ottawa, they've been so tasty, and so many people are loving them. They've got them all over town. You're never too far away from a Shawarma Palace. Whether you're in the Bank and Hunt Club area, whether you're at Bank and Gladstone right by Baseball Town, you can be in Orleans, you can be at Carleton University, or at the Saint Laurent Shopping Center. You can also be wherever, thanks to their partnership with Uber Eats. They can bring it right to you. I always recommend getting the platter, get the extra garlic. It is a meal and a half, and that even might be underselling it. While Pilsy likes to graze on his sandwich. As we know, Pilsy likes to make sure he enjoys every bite of his Shawarma Palace. And you can too by going to Shawarma Palace. So eat like a royal today. I'm telling you, go eat at Shawarma Palace. All right, Pilsy, we've already given the full disclosure. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, and we just saw Bruce Garriock and Claire Hanna giving an update, and there's lots of moving parts, and the Senators are working hard to get a contract done with Shane Pinto. So take this segment for what it's worth, and we will let you know exactly where we'd place Shane Pinto. It's not hard to figure that out once we get to Group B, but let's start with Group A. And if you're watching on YouTube, we're pulling up the entire Group A depth chart. Now, Pilsy, that top line, that to me, you could lock it in for the whole season and I'd be happy. It's Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, and Claude Giroux. And I guess we should make clear that they're pretty much breaking this up by line. Have you noticed that trend? Was it pretty easy for you as we went through this that it was going to be, this line, that makes sense?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really piece that together. That was you that brought that to my attention. And then as you kind of notice that, you can start piecing together, okay, here's a line, here's a line, here's a line, here's a pair, here's a pair. So yes, you can kind of get an idea for what they're trying to do and which battles they're trying to entice here, that's the fun of training camp. You start looking at things and you say, what are they saying without actually saying it?
So what's the number one battle for you with Group A? As I don't think we have to list off every single name. I think throughout it, we'll kind of bring it up, but we'll tweet these out as well. So if you want to see the full list of each group, head over to Twitter at Sens Central. But Pilsy, it looks like the Group A for me, it's like the battle for the fourth line, pretty much.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely on the forwards. That's what's going on here is you got a lot of kind of fringe NHL players that'll be battling for the fourth line. But Ross, I was going to actually go in a different direction with my top battle. I was going to go with Kleven and JBD. It seems that Eric Brandstrom and Travis Hamonic are paired up. We'll get to that on the next group lineup here. But Kleven and JBD, both those guys want to prove that they can be the next guy up, especially JBD on a one-way contract that will require waivers if he's sent down. So that's actually the battle I'm looking at here is Kleven and JBD. Can they be the guy that becomes either the 6th or 7th defenseman?
And don't sleep on Nicholas Matin-Paolo as well.
True. Yep.
So, but he also, obviously, because he came over, even though he's 24, he does not need waivers, whereas 22-year-old Lassie Thompson does need waivers. So I'm going to even extend that then and say the right side of the D-core for me here is Group A, where it's JBD, it's Matin-Paolo, and it's Lassie Thompson. Who is going to come out of that on top? We know JBD's got the runway here as the one-way contract, played well down the stretch for Ottawa, but I'm interested to see even Matin-Paolo and Lassie Thompson, former teammates with Eels. How are they going to compete against one another, whether it's playing time in Belleville or Lassie's case? Can he tempt another team to pluck him off of waivers, knowing that if you take someone off of waivers during training camp, they have to be on your NHL roster on opening night. So that's where, it throws dynamics into other teams where it's like, oh, well, what does that say to our team if we're like, oh, this guy who couldn't make that team, we need him on ours. So it is a time where you can usually sneak guys through waivers. The most famous example is Ottawa putting Mike Hoffman on waivers in 2014. And the next year, he's putting up 15, 20 goals in the National Hockey League. So I like that, Pillsy. You're looking at the D-core with Tyler Clevin there as well. Kind of an undercover. It's not necessarily a battle. I am going to kind of expand on me talking about the fourth line and different aspects of this. But Jorian Donovan and Thomas Hamara, those two, I feel like for the next 2, 3, 4 years are going to be attached at the hip. Whereas I think there's only ever going to be a spot for one of them at the NHL level. Like, is that too bold to say?
No, I would agree with you, Ross. I think those guys are at the same spot in their development, or at least very similar. They were drafted. What, they the same year?
Yeah.
Hamara third, Donovan fifth?
Fifth, exactly. And
yeah.
Allie was fourth that year.
Yeah, so same draft class, and I think they're similar players, but each kind of provides a little different aspect to their game, and that's where it's going to be interesting to see how things go.
I'm very curious to see that. Now, fourth line, who do you think has the edge for the fourth line here, Pillsy? Because right now, the way that we have it up here, I'll pull it back up, is Castella, Kelly, and McEwen. Do you think that's kind of they're all one-way contracts? Is that as simple as we did to find those three together?
In my opinion, yes, Ross. I think Kelly, Cassidy, and McEwen, that's a really nice fourth line. Kelly and Cassidy obviously have a lot of chemistry playing together. And I think Zach McEwen, that's a guy that DJ Smith's going to like having there on that fourth line as well. So as far as I'm concerned, as Cassidy, I would put in pen as that fourth line center, maybe even permanent marker. And then Kelly and McEwen, it's their jobs to lose, in my opinion.
And one of those guys who we think maybe could be the guy who comes and grabs that spot is Igor Sokolov, who just signed his contract. I think, to me, it's a situation where, what do you want from your fourth line? Do you want them to just be gritty? I think this is a better setup, Pillsy? You can see
Let's
that.
Go with this. Yeah.
Here. Okay, now we're the teachers. We can, point and do all that. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what we're talking about. If not, apologies. But, okay, so this line is interesting. And Pillsy, this might be a hot take. And I love Cassidy. I think Cassidy's a fourth line center. I agree. Lock it in. But if for a game this season in the NHL level, we saw a line of Ridley Gregg, Yuri Smejkal, and Igor Sokolov, like that to me piques my interest, because we're going to talk at the end of the show how the fitness testing went. But Ridley Gregg, I think, is ready to be a full-time NHLer. Could it come on the wing in Parker Kelly's spot and Zach McEwen's spot? Maybe. But I also know the Senators really do see Ridley Gregg as a centerman at the NHL level. Is there room in Ottawa there? Maybe not. But
or maybe.
or maybe, exactly.
Yeah.
So, like that, to me, he's the X factor in Group A.
Yeah, I think Smejkal, Gregg, and Sokolov is an interesting line to put together, Ross. But the thing is, I start looking at these guys and I start thinking, I don't really see either of these guys being set up to succeed in a fourth line role. Like Igor Sokolov only getting 7 minutes when he's used to playing top minutes in Belleville. I don't see that really as a great spot for him. I'd rather have him on the third line. Yuri Smejkal, I'm sure he didn't have dreams of being a fourth line NHLer. And then Ridley Gregg, sure, if you want to get him some reps at center, that's great. But I would rather have him playing top line in Belleville Center rather than 7 to 10 minutes in the NHL personally. So I think those guys definitely are trying to make a push for the NHL. But personally, I think any of those guys on the fourth line wouldn't be the best fit.
The other guys down here, I mean, Philippe Daoust, so much speed, but I think that he's obviously destined for Belleville, but I think he could surprise down there. And then, man, if the second line in Belleville, and we don't have to get into what the first line would be, well, plenty of time to talk about Belleville, but Zach Ostapchuk with Cole Reinhart and Matthew Highmore, I liked kind of the balance of what they could bring in terms of being defensively responsible, but also having some high-end upside skill, at least at the AHL level, offensively. If you look at Matthew Highmore, he would have led Belleville's team in points last year at the AHL level. So lots of intrigue with Group A, Pillsy. If I had to give you one player to watch, who would you choose?
It's got to be Ridley.
Do not say Stützle, Tkachuk, or Giroux. We know what we got in them.
No, well, you know where I was going. It's got to be Ridley Gregg, in my opinion, because you talk about X factors. Norris is an X factor. Pinto is an X factor. So inherently, if neither of those guys can play early on, or God forbid, worse, extended time, Ridley Gregg becomes this team's number 2 centerman yet again. So this is huge for Ridley Gregg. I think really he's got to have a good showing. Not that I think he wouldn't. I think he's a guy that has put a lot of work in the offseason, and we'll get to that later on in the episode, maybe at the end. But Ridley Gregg is the guy in this grouping that I'm really keeping an eye on.
I'll take the wings, who can see a lot of footsteps coming in the background. Parker Kelly and Zach McEwen. These guys, they need to be at their best at what they do.
Yeah.
Esky, forechecking. Make sure that you know what you do best and do that night in, night out, or I guess day in, day out as training camp. It's always, midday, but in the preseason games as well. Like, don't rest on the fact that you have one-way contracts, because there's a lot of hungry sharks and other players down a little bit lower in this lineup that I think want to make sure that their presence is felt. The goalies for Group A, Eunice Corpusalo, Kevin Mandolese, and Levi Marilainen. So that's Group A. Coming up next, we'll get to Group B. You're listening to Locked On Senators.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Bird Dogs. Ross and I absolutely love our Bird Dogs. Ross, you were in New York and you got to see the Bird Dog store.
Yeah, I got to see the storefront right there. It looked great. I even went in, poked my head in. I said, Locked On. They said, oh, yeah, you're the Locked On Sens guys, aren't you?
Nice. You were probably decked out in your Bird Dogs gear, made it pretty obvious.
I was legitimately wearing Bird Dog shorts when I walked in. I said, you guys sent me these. Appreciate it. These are awesome. And then, so I bought a couple more. They are literally the comfiest shorts you will ever try on.
And that's the thing. You want to feel good. It's all about comfort. And then if you can look good while feeling good, that's the ultimate combo. And you guys may be thinking, well, Bird Dog shorts, short season's coming to an end here. Well, there's more, as they have joggers. I'm getting into the joggers, Ross. They are so comfy. They are stylish. I like doing my morning walks in the joggers when it's a little chillier. And it's such a relaxing fit. They got nice pockets. And what I like about everything that Bird Dog has, the joggers, the shorts, they have an anti-stink sweat wicking fabric. That's key. You want to keep cool and dry and smelling good all day long. They're perfect for any function. Like I said, walk in. Ross takes his dog out for a walk in the morning. He's got the Bird Dogs on. You're going golfing. You got a date. You're meeting friends for drinks later on at the GLEBE Central Pub. Whatever it is, you can rock your Bird Dog. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL at checkout. And you're going to get a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOn for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you.
All right, Pillsy. Shane Pinto still has not signed.
Come on.
And I hope this ages like mold. I really do. But as of right now, Shane Pinto has not signed. What I can tell you, though, is yesterday, Mark Mathot made his return to Locked On Senators. And here's what I'll ask. Just go shoot him a tweet. Just real quick. Just say, love you on Locked On Senators. I feel like we got to get the vibes going. He's been on 13 times, and he hasn't asked for a nickel. He's doing it out of the love of his heart and the love of the game. And we appreciate him for that. So make sure you go pass along to Mark Mathot that you as well appreciate him coming on with us here on Locked On Senders. Such a great guy, man. His insight's unmatched. As I mentioned off the top when I introduced him, last time the Sens played a playoff game, he was a top pair defenseman. Like, I don't know if that says more about the Senators' failure to make the playoffs in the last 7 years or the fact that he's just a dog and absolutely love having him on.
Let's go with the latter. Meth is just a dog, the meth dog. He's nothing like just having meth on, hit and record, and just shooting the breeze. It always ends up being a great conversation. So if you missed that, go check it out for sure.
Exactly. And also, just want to say, and we're only going to promote this for a little bit longer because the draft is going to come up, but if you are interested in joining a fantasy hockey league, head over to the Sens Central Patreon, and we are going to have a very active fantasy hockey league. We're almost up to the perfect number of players, we'll say. So make sure you go check that out on Patreon. You can find that link in the bio of our show.
And our most recent Sens Central citizen, Avi. He will be a part of that as well. And we'll see, Ross, if we're going to have, it's going to be like training camp. We're going to have a group A. That's probably the group I'll be in. We'll have a group B. That's where you'll be in. And we'll see who can duke it out from group A and group B.
I'm very excited for this. So stay tuned for that. If you are interested, head over to the Patreon and you will be able to take part in the Fantasy Hockey League. All right, Pilsy, let's get back to the real life Hockey League. The Ottawa Senators on the ice for training camp, probably as you're listening to this. And I'll have updates for you throughout the day on Twitter at Sens Central. But Pilsy, the lines for Group B, we're going to pull those up with us right here on YouTube. So I think I chopped off the top there, but rather have all the players in it anyway. So the top line is Josh Norris. We've already discussed the intrigue, or should I say the scare, around the fact that Josh Norris will be wearing a yellow non-contact jersey. He's scheduled to play on a line with Tarasenko and Drake Batherson. Still unknown who's going to play left wing on that line. I don't think it matters a whole lot. Tarasenko is a left shot. I don't know if that makes any difference, but you know, those Russians, they like playing their off wing, getting those one-timers off in an absolute hurry. So we've got Tarasenko playing right wing, where he's played the majority of his career, if not all of his career. But beyond that, Pilsy, this is placeholder time, and that's what I told you the other day on Locked On Senators. I said, I don't think it's going to be Ridley Gregg. I think that they're just going to put a placeholder there and hope Shane Pinto can be back. But we have Kubalik and Joseph on either wing, and we just put Chartier there, but you know, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, this is, just for clarity's sake, this is the group that Shane Pinto was put in. However, without a contract, again, we're recording this on Wednesday. So far, he will not be there. And we've got Boucher here with an asterisk. But as we mentioned, he tweaked his groin, so he won't be a part of the camp, at least early on here.
So this is like the battle for third line, give or take. And there's a chance that Mathieu Joseph, who I believe will be the odd man out in all this. Not that that's a hot take. I know I had a dramatic pause there, Pilsy. That was you know, probably unnecessary. But I wonder if Josh Bailey's going to get first shot on that third line, you know, quasi third line. I really do think that we're going to see Mathieu Joseph on the outside looking in at training camp, and this could age poorly. This is the episode that could age the quickest out of anyone we've ever done. But I do think that Josh Bailey is going to get an inside track to play on the third line on a cheap league minimum deal. But the opportunity is what's going to entice him, you know, to play here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Ross, if we're highlighting guys to watch here, I'm going to highlight Mathieu Joseph just because, man, it's got to be a weird situation he's in. Now, there hasn't been any official kind of announcements that he's the guy, but I think everyone in the hockey world, not just Sens fans, has kind of circled him as the guy that would be on the way out, especially after how last season went and with his contract trying to clear up money. So if I'm Mathieu Joseph, this is a very, very pivotal camp for you. Either you gotta work super hard to show the Sens, hey, I'm not the guy you want to get rid of. I'm the guy you want to keep around to help this team. I've got a contract here for 3 more seasons. I like being here. I like this group. I want to stay here, and I'll prove it. I'll prove that I'm worth keeping around. Or it's, all right, I feel my seat's getting warm. I'm on the hot seat. I'm in all the rumor mills on Twitter. I'm sure whether he's on Twitter or not, people have made him aware that that's kind of the conversation that's happening. So I want to have the best showing I have so that I can show teams that are maybe interested in acquiring me that I'm not just a cap dump. I can actually help out their team as well.
I've heard he's on Instagram for sure. I don't know about Twitter. But when you look at X factors on this Group B, you're watching Mathieu Joseph. For me, and let's stick it forward because we'll talk about the decor here in a little while. 2 of the 3 expected pairs to be on the NHL roster are on this pair. Angus Crookshank, man, I feel like there hasn't been a lot of talk about him this offseason. And that's probably for the best because last offseason it was how was he going to come back from that year-long knee injury. He comes back and leads the Belleville Sens in goal scoring. I think that he looks at this and says, hey, if I grind it out, man, I could be noticed in this group. And I'm going to be watching for Angus Crookshank and Josh Bailey will be the 2 players. So
can I pick a second player then?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're going to see Boko Imama make some noise in this training camp. I think whether it's going to be a big hit, maybe a feisty situation where he gets in a quick scrap, hopefully nothing too crazy, but I feel like he's going to really try to make an impression and show the physicality of his game and say, hey, I know Zach McEwen's here and he brought him in a 3-year deal, but I can throw my weight around and I can be an impact on a fourth line as well. And we even saw he got the number 14. That's an NHL number. And Pierre Dorion told us personally they had their kind of thoughts on Imama could be a part of the NHL roster here this year. So that would be my second guy to watch for on this group, Ross.
He's built like an absolute unit. And the rumors are that he was not at the golf tournament because he'd rather spend the time training at the CTC. He said, boys, I'll meet you back here. And don't take that as like, oh, doesn't want to hang out with his teammates. This guy was personality plus when we briefly ran into him at development camp where he was just kind of getting the number. There was actually the behind the scenes video came out. So none of that. He's a team first guy, but he also has to get his lifts in. Let's put it that way. He is he knows what his role is in Ottawa. It's forecheck. It's, stand up for your teammates. It's all of the above. And the AHL, or at least Tucson, I don't know if it was a league-wide or a team award, but was the man of the year down there. So I'm excited to see what he's got as well. Now let's turn our attention to the back end. We should briefly just mention Anton Forsberg, Matt Sogard, the goalies for Group B. Now, Shabbat Chikrin, it's obviously going to be really intriguing to see who plays the right side. We believe it will be Chikrin. And then what the chemistry is going to be like with two guys who both like to jump up in the rush. How are they going to find each other out there on the ice? What else are you looking for on the back end?
Well, Chikrin was going to be the guy I was going to highlight, Ross, just because, look, obviously that's his spot. He's not fighting for a spot in camp or anything like that. That's not what I'm insinuating here. But, however, he hasn't played as much on the right side as I think most Sens fans kind of assumed he has. I'll throw myself in that corner as well. I thought he played a lot more there. It's mostly been the left side. He can play the right side. But the big thing here, Ross, is Shabbat has struggled to find a partner that works for him. So Jacob Chikrin needs to do everything he can to make this pairing work with Thomas Chabot so that this team can finally have a really good number one D pair, and Thomas Chabot doesn't feel like he has to kind of pick up the slack for a defensive partner that maybe isn't of the caliber of being a top 4 or top pair guy. So Chikrin is going to be someone that I'm going to be watching here.
Donovan Sabrango as well for me, obviously acquired in that Detroit trade, and people just thought, you know what, he played in the ECHL last year. Like, how high of a prospect can he be? But then after talking to our guy, Sean Fafaro from Rogers TV in Kitchener, like, it sounds like this guy's really got some upside. So I'll be keeping an eye on Donovan Sabrango to see how he fits into all this. The other D pair there, and Matthew Andonovsky is expected to go back and play in Kitchener this year, but he'll get a few reps here early on in preseason. The other one is captain of the Belleville Sens, Dylan Hetherington, with Max Gannett. They had a lot of success together last year in Belleville. So obviously Gannett got to play in game 82 last year for Ottawa. So it'll be interesting to see what he brings at training camp. But I would say that's in all likelihood the top pair in Belleville is Dylan Hetherington and Maxence Gannett. Yep,
I would agree with you. And if I'm going to highlight another guy, Ross, I'll go with my guy, Eric Brandstrom here, because look, just because you finally got the pay raise you were looking for, you had a nice season last year, there's guys coming for that spot on the left side of that third pair. And Eric Brandstrom, although it seems like it's set up for it to be his job to lose, there's footsteps, that's for sure. And not only footsteps, Ross, but train tracks that are leading towards his spot there as well.
Choo. We got into that conversation with Mark Mathot yesterday. Group C is also known as the Camp Invite group. Now, McPhee, Saulnier, Sinclair all have one-way AHL contracts. McKinnon as well. No, not Nathan McKinnon. That would be nice. How, especially with the center depth right now. With the
I don't think we put him on right D, though.
No, I mean, he could play anywhere.
Yeah, well, I'd try it. Yeah, sure.
He'd play anywhere. But obviously, the name that jumps out here is Taron Fizer, who was unbelievable, 4 goals in 3 games at the prospect tournament. And we keep hearing about Jabril Toure, who played with Pierre Dorion's son in Junior A with Hawkesbury 2 years ago. He has since moved on to the Sudbury Wolves. Toure has, and that's a player 6'7", beat the wheels off Montreal Canadiens prospect the other day. Keep your eye on Toure as a player who could get a contract when all is said and done here in Senators training camp.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Ross. He's a right shot defenseman and a 6'7" guy that can move and skate better than you would assume a 6'7" guy could skate is going to have him turning a lot of heads. And I think it's good that the Ottawa Senators are kind of, I don't want to say staking their claim because they haven't signed him, they don't have the rights to him, but are already kind of getting him into the organization, and they're well aware of what the potential for Toure could be.
Cannot wait. We'll have more on Twitter at Sens Central as the day progresses. And if Shane Pinto does sign, whether it's before this episode or whenever, we will have a bonus little video for you about what it means for the Senators heading in to training camp. As I mentioned, the 2 on-ice sessions, 10:50 and 12:25. You can go on Twitter and follow media_Sens. The Sens PR team pretty good at putting out when the skates will happen throughout the week. We'll be back on Friday after, and we'll compare. We'll see how wrong we were today, and we'll get into all that. Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Yes, final thoughts for me are in Pierre Dorion and DJ Smith's presser. They talked about fitness testing for some of the players, and it was basically the way I thought it would go, with one very nice surprise. So I think this would have been my top guess, Ross, but Mark Kaslick finished at top of all the fitness training I know. DJ Smith said it. He's the strongest guy in the organization. He's faster than a lot of people would assume. I feel like this guy, just like him and Boko in the gym, would be absolutely wild to watch, as these guys are probably throwing around big weights. Now, second was Jake Sanderson, which didn't fully shock me because he's a guy that is very disciplined and very kind of focused on getting better, especially after signing that ticket. Sheesh. You better be hitting the gym, kid. So Jake Sanderson is number 2. But number 3 is what I'd really like to see, Ross. Ridley Gregg was number 3. We learned last year he was drinking 4 protein shakes a day. All he heard was, Ridley's got to get his size up, got to get his size up, got to get some muscle, got to grow, gain a couple pounds. And it seems like whatever he's been doing has been working. His fitness is like number 3 on the team, is pretty damn solid. So this could be a very, very big year for Ridley Gregg, and he's making sure he's ready for whatever is thrown his way.
Cannot wait to see the boys in action Sunday, the first preseason game against Toronto at 2 p.m. Eastern. My final thoughts, and it's about what DJ Smith said during his press conference. I found this to be pretty interesting. He asked the Sens' new director of analytics, Sean Tierney, to come with a presentation of what the best teams do and make a comparison to what his team, Ottawa, isn't good at. So I hope that it's just another sign. Like, say what you want about DJ's strategy at times. This guy is a very thoughtful, and you know, he's someone you can be proud that's coaching your team. It's just a matter of getting the X's and O's to where it has to be. But in an era where all we're hearing about is Mike Babcock and all the things that he did that were so just weird. And the irony here is that DJ Smith worked under Mike Babcock for 2 or 3 years in Toronto. But hey, it's about also learning what not to do. And I think DJ's clearly made a welcoming environment in Ottawa, but he's realized that there's some X's and O's maybe that need improvement. So I like that he's bringing in the new voice and being like, hey, what do I need to be better at? So I really like that Sean Tierney's being involved on that level.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you want an analytical department not to just go off numbers and just be robots and say, well, this is what the math says, so that's what we're going to do, but to use it as a tool to understand how you can improve and maybe where some glaring weaknesses or, you know, how to better utilize your strengths or anything like that. You want to use it as a tool in conjunction with that classic hockey sense and eye test stuff. So I think that's a great sign, and that's a great point, Ross.
We'll be back more on Friday. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.